We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some more offseason trade speculation. Today's rumor mill focusing on teams like the Montreal Canadiens, Buffalo Sabres, the Calgary Flames, New Jersey Devils, a few tidbits around the Edmonton Oilers as well, some UFA speculation on remaining players that are unsigned like Jack Roslovic. We have an update on the CBA as well, which is going to be voted on here in the near future. Plus, we have team-elected salary arbitration for a couple of our RFAs. We have a bunch of RFA signings as well, including a key goaltender in the Montreal Canadiens organization, and some other tidbits around the NHL for some things that almost happened but didn't quite make it there during free agency. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. A lot of information today from Elliotte Friedman as he completed the season finale, if you will, for the 32 Thoughts podcast. It was 3 hours long, tons of info in there. One key tidbit as well around the new collective bargaining agreement, which has agreed upon in principle between the league and the NHLPA. Players are beginning the voting process on that over the course of this weekend, so I would suspect most likely here in the coming days, we're probably going to hear that the vote has been accepted and the deal has been ratified. At least I would expect that. I can't imagine the NHLPA would put forth a deal to the players that would end up getting voted down. So we should have some news on that here soon, since the voting is already underway. As we talked about in a video earlier this evening as well, we had a couple of teams take players to team-elected salary arbitration. Yesterday was the deadline for player-elected salary arbitration, and 11 players opted for that process. Now, of course, with both of these scenarios, the hope is that you get a deal figured out on your own before you ever make it to that process. Generally speaking, how that works is the teams and the players end up having hearings, which is almost like a little bit of a court case, if you will. And generally, they start scheduling them usually towards I'd say probably the third week of July through the rest of the month into August. So you're probably looking at least 2 to 3 weeks for most cases, sometimes 4 or 5 weeks out before they officially have their date where they actually begin the hearing process. Then on the day of their hearing, they go in, they each argue their case, and then the arbitrator has so many days to deliberate and deliver the response. It's usually a couple of days, like 48 hours in most cases here. So with the 11 players that filed yesterday, most of those are probably at least 8, 9 of them, maybe even 10, you never know, will likely get settled on their own and not end up going through the process. Now, we had 2 teams today elect to take players to arbitration and team-elected arbitration, and that's Buffalo with Bo Byram and Utah with Jack McBain. Of course, Bo Byram is a player we're going to touch on a little bit later as well. A player that's highly speculated to be traded. There's been all kinds of trade talk around this player, and well, we know that Byram is looking for a big payday, and we know that he would like to be paid like a number one defenseman. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. By, of course, taking these players to arbitration, they do protect themselves from potential offer sheets. Same thing with the 11 players who filed yesterday. They are no longer eligible for offer sheets here as well. So Bo Byram and Jack McBain are 2 more guys off the list who cannot have that scenario present itself. There are some other players that are eligible for offer sheets that are not eligible for arbitration as well. I know there might have been some confusion on the video yesterday. Like Mason McTavish, Anaheim, prime example, one of the top RFAs that are unsigned, that has not eligible for arbitration. So he is still, so he couldn't file, but he is eligible for an offer sheet if a team gets to that point to be successful to get him to accept one. So either way, Byram and McBain, team elected salary arbitration. A bunch of signings did take place today as well, including the Habs getting young goaltender Jakub Dobeš signed. He gets a 2-year deal at $965K. It's a one-way contract. That's more than fair. He had a pretty solid development year last year. Get to go up to the Canadiens at the big club and play a decent amount of games once they kind of lost faith in Caden Primo. Had his ups and downs, but for the most part, it was positive, and seems like I think it's probably fair to say he's ready for full-time backup duty next year to San Montembeault. At least that looks like it's the expectation for the team as well, and that's kind of what we expect in a training camp. So more than fair contract in that case. The Islanders have signed Mark Gatcomb to a 1-year deal, $900K. Vegas signed a trio of players, including Cole Schwindt, 1 year, $812,000. Jonas Rongberg, 1 year, $775,000. It's a two-way deal. The AHL salary is $250,000. And Raphael Lavoie, of course, who came over to Vegas last year from the Oilers, gets a 1 year deal, $775,000, and it's of course a two-way contract as well. $235,000 at the American Hockey League level. St. Louis today re-signed RFA goaltender Vadim Sherko, 1 year, two-way deal, $775,000 and $125,000. The Rangers have re-signed RFA forward 23-year-old Brendan Brisson. Of course, another Vegas prospect at one point came over in trade there. The RFA forward gets a 1 year, two-way deal, $775,000 and $125,000 at the AHL. The St. Louis Blues also signed 24-year-old RFA defenseman Hunter Skinner to a 1 year, two-way deal, $775,000 and $125,000 at the AHL level. The top remaining are UFA out there, at least I would think arguably the top remaining UFA is Jack Roslovic, remaining unsigned. Elliot Friedman did confirm on his podcast today that there seems to be around 4 teams that are in the mix for his services, one being Toronto, Washington, San Jose, and Buffalo. A couple of these teams, though, are trying to move other pieces before they commit to a contract with them. Toronto being one of those. Of course, we know the Maple Leafs, as we've talked about here in recent days, have a little bit of a logjam in forward. They're trying to move players like Calle Jarnkrok, David Kampf. To some degree, there's maybe a possibility they move Max Domi. I think Jarnkrok and Kampf are more likely than those two. Wouldn't completely rule out Nick Robertson as well, who was one of the players in the RFA market who filed for player elect at salary arbitration yesterday, which I was a little bit confused by. I don't think he's got a great case to get a much more than his qualifying offer, maybe a little bit, but I don't know where negotiations stood either, so clearly he had his reasons for doing so. But the belief in Toronto is before they signed another UFA forward, because they were in on Andrew Mangiapane as well, as they wanted to clear out at least one more roster spot for him, some more spot and money. And in Mangiapane's case, I think there was some interest to go there, but he didn't really want to wait around for that to happen, so he had the opportunity at Edmonton and decided to go for that one. So the Leafs are in on Roslovic. Right now, he's being patient. So we'll see. The Sharks, Sabres, Capitals, as I mentioned, also in the mix. The Capitals were heavy into trying to get Nick Ehlers, so now that ship has sailed, we'll see what they end up doing here with Roslovic. And in Buffalo's case as well, they also have quite a few players in their contract, so it's believed that they're in the process of trying to make some moves as well. We know that they definitely are, and that they kind of wanted to hold off before giving Roslovic a better offer. So I think in some of these teams, he's waiting to see what they're going to do, and a couple of these teams are probably more prepared to give him a deal. Like the Sharks, I would suspect, would be a place that would be able to do that right away. But we'll see. He's definitely a player with a decent amount of interest out there. I know Elliot Friedman, on one of the things he said that was interesting on the podcast today as well, was one of the reasons that led to the Evan Bouchard contract coming together so quickly with the Edmonton Oilers was to avoid an offer sheet. Apparently there was a threat of an offer sheet coming from, you guessed it, Carolina. Of course, after Bouchard got signed and that was no longer an option, they pivoted towards K-Andre Miller of the New York Rangers. And, of course, they ended up doing the sign and trade as well instead. But certainly Carolina was pretty determined to go out there and get one of the top young RFA defensemen to bring over to their club. And once teams kind of got a whiff of this, they were trying to protect themselves. So we knew in Bouchard's case that there would be interest. And I don't know for sure if he would have actually signed an offer sheet, but they were threatening to send one his way that would have been pretty lucrative. So Edmonton got ahead of that one to make sure they didn't have any other issues in that sense. Friedman did talk about the Edmonton Oilers on his podcast as well, in a different vein here, saying that at the end of the season, they did go to all their players who had trade protection in their contracts and see if any of them would have any appetite to move. Obviously, Victor Arvidsson agreed that it wasn't a great fit and agreed to play ball, but a couple of names that they did speak to that didn't really show any interest, so therefore aren't going anywhere. One being defenseman Darnell Nurse and forward Adam Henrique. Nurse, I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest, that they even talked to him. He does have a lot of term and money both left on that deal. I know how much his teammates like him and how much he is a big part of the dressing room, but clearly his playoff performances in the last 2 years as they went to the final and even few years before that, certainly not the best. But they did try to see if some of these guys would waive. They didn't get a lot of help, which is why we haven't seen as much movement there. And obviously, some of the UFAs walked, like Perry and Brown and a few others here. So, yeah, interesting to see that the Oilers did indeed try. Now, Frank Seravalli mentioned, this was actually, I didn't see it until today, but from a couple days ago, that even though Jordan Kyrou's no trade clause with Montreal or with St. Louis has kicked in, that Montreal is still trying. They're still engaged in conversation. They still have interest in this player. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to make it work. Some are looking at this going, well, what is the fit here? Where would they put him? What would they offer? I don't really know. I mean, are they offering like Patrick Laine or something? Because I know there's been some debate over where does he fit in the lineup. And I've seen some chatter again from BPM Sports here in recent days, kind of talking the same thing, and I've kind of gone about that on my own without, not necessarily as a rumor, but just on my own opinion here in some videos here in the channel in the last couple of weeks, saying I do wonder what the long-term future holds for Laine in Montreal. I don't see him being a third-line player. I also don't see him being a good fit with Ivan Demidov, and with the acquisitions that they've made, especially with like Boldu coming in, I do wonder if he could be a trade piece. Like, what does his long-term future hold? And they were kind of debating that as well on BPM Sports, talking about, what is the fit here? Does he get a short-term extension? Does he do a long-term extension? Is he maybe moved out? Is there any chance they could have bought him out? Obviously, that time has come and gone now. But, it's just what is the fit there? So I don't know if they're actually, we haven't heard any speculation that he's been a player that they're dangling into these conversations. But if you keep Laine, for example, if he's not in those trade talks and you have Caulfield and you have these other wingers that they got, like, I just don't know what are you going to do with Kyrou when you bring him in? Like, where are you going to put him? Who do you see him pairing up with or lining up with in a line? Who would you offer? I'm just not sure what the end goal there is and how that would all work. But, Seravalli still seems to think that there's still some interest. We don't know for sure and have any reason to think that Kyrou would necessarily waive to go to Montreal. I'm not sure. But there's still chatter around it, so we'll see if anything comes from it. Now, Elliotte Friedman did mention on his podcast today another interesting name to maybe keep an eye on over the next little while here in the summer is Dougie Hamilton in New Jersey. We did touch on Hamilton back. I know when I was talking about when doing my off-season plan series, which was strictly, again, at that point, there was no rumors around Hamilton. It was just my own opinion, saying I wonder if they would consider a Dougie Hamilton trade. Given what they have on that blue line, and they have the young right-hand D coming up. Look at the young D they have in the system. Between Nemec and then I got Seamus Casey. Of course, Luke Hughes is still pretty young. Like, they signed Kovacevic to a longer-term extension. Like, I just don't know that they wouldn't move out a veteran there. I don't see them wanting to move out a bunch of these young D and not give them a chance to succeed. And we know that, Hamilton's had his injury issues as well. So Friedman confirms that Hamilton's name is definitely out there. He had a full no move, which now as of July 1st has changed. It is now a partial no trade. So it's a little bit easier without needing his full consent for all teams. So, again, he expects that the Devils have had talks with a few teams for sure around Hamilton. Can't say with any certainty exactly who those teams could be, or if not necessarily anything's imminent or anything like that. But Hamilton's name is out there. It's definitely in play. They've had some conversations. I do wonder if you look around some teams, though, that might have a need. I'd wondered before if Toronto would consider something like that. But again, they'd have to move out a D, and it would be more of a swap of different types of D. New Jersey may not want to do that, but I know there has been links of Hamilton to them before, mainly because of the Brad Treliving connection. Of course, Treliving had him in Calgary, helped bring him there from when he was first traded to the Flames from the Bruins. So, obviously he's traded for Hamilton and he's traded Hamilton out. So, there's definitely lots of history there with the player. There is lots to like about his game. He's a huge guy, 6'5" or 6", whatever he is, right shot. He's got lots of offensive skills, and it's a premium position when you have guys that can do what he does. So I have no doubt that they would get a good return, but not quite sure exactly what the future holds, but it is possible the Devils move him this offseason. When it comes to Bo Byram, I know one of the main teams we've heard about is the Blues. I know the Kings are linked out there as well. I've heard a little bit about Detroit, but that's probably a little bit less likely. But St. Louis by far seems to be the team that we hear about the most with Bo Byram. I know some reports from Blues beat writer Jeremy Rutherford indicated that he believed that the Blues in their Byram discussions with the Sabres were trying to include defenseman Justin Falk, and they acknowledges that they probably have to include a younger player, probably a forward, maybe even a guy like Jake Neighbors. I mean, Byram apparently looking for a long-term deal in that $9 million range. I know Friedman mentioned on the podcast today that Byram doesn't necessarily want out. It seems like he's quite okay with moving on, but he's more concerned about getting the big payday. So obviously, like, if the Sabres are willing to give him the contract he wants, then maybe he doesn't move. But it just seems like with everything that's gone on around the player, that seems not very likely. At least I wouldn't think so. But again, Byram is a player that's got a lot of interest out there. But, I mean, we know that when they made the move around Peterka, and Friedman also confirmed for sure that Peterka 100% wanted out and told them that he was not coming back. So they obviously felt the need that they had to get that done as much as they didn't really want to do it. It's a little bit different with Byram, although they do seem pretty motivated to do it. We know they were motivated to get Michael Kesselring from Utah. Would they want or be interested in a guy like Justin Falk, a veteran right shot defenseman with some offensive skills? So I don't know. That could be why things are held up. Maybe the offer is not exactly what they're looking for. I would suspect they'd probably have interest in Neighbors, but they may want a different defenseman back. And maybe at this point, St. Louis are not necessarily willing to include that. So that's going to be interesting to see here kind of what happens. I know Elliot also on the 32 Thoughts podcast talked about the Calgary Flames and all the noise around Nazem Kadri. He said he was quite surprised to hear all the chatter online around him, but acknowledges from when he's looked into it that he doesn't think the Flames really are out there trying to trade Kadri at all. This is more of a case of teams inquiring and kind of making calls saying, hey, would you consider this? There's lots of interest in the player. We know the Flames have not been a playoff team. They've kind of went through, I don't know what you want to call it. It wasn't really a full rebuild, but definitely a retool, and they're trying to get back to playoffs. And some are wondering if he'd like an opportunity to play on a team that's closer to winning, to get back to being more competitive. There was links, as we talked about the Maple Leafs and having some level of interest there. But again, that was a intriguing idea we talked about yesterday between the Flames and the Leafs, maybe having a deal that makes sense there. But again, like Elliot said, it's more of a case of teams inquiring on the Flames. They're not overly motivated unless they get an offer that they're just blown away by. They're probably not going to go to Kadri and really talk to him about it and see if he has interest to Waive to make it happen. But there is belief that a team like Toronto and a reunion there is not something that he would be 100% opposed to. So if it worked out, it's possible that it happens. But Friedman basically confirming that the Flames are not going out of their way to have conversations about trading Kadri, and that it's just a case of teams kind of going to them, which is where all the chatter is coming from, which means it's probably pretty less likely that we see a move. I know with Rasmus Andersson, again, he said with all the talk around Vegas that there is some truth to that would be a preferred destination for Rasmus Andersson, and he would consider signing there if he were traded. But again, he's not convinced. It's just a case of I'll only play for Vegas. He thinks that it's a short list, but not necessarily just one team. He thinks there's probably at least, a few more. We've heard about Dallas being a potential destination that he believes that Anderson might consider going to, but there were a few other teams that were in the mix there as well, including, I think, the LA Kings, Ottawa Senators, and he's, based on what he's been told, it sounds like those are teams that Rasmus Andersson has blocked through his modified no trade. So, again, obviously he's got his reasons, but it seems like going to an American team most likely in a non-state tax area. It seems to be what he's looking for, but we'll have to see where that goes. So lots of updates here today. Of course, let me know your thoughts on all these trade talks around the UFA market as well, the RFA salary arbitration, how you think all this is going to play out. Alan Walsh, too, another prominent agent around the NHL, made mention that he thinks by next week the trade market's going to really heat up and we're going to see some big deals go through, which are going to end up spawning probably a bunch of reaction moves, and that it could get a couple of weeks of not necessarily hectic, but fairly consistent busy activity in the trade market. So we'll see if the theory there is correct. Let me know your thoughts on today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.